So the reason why I've gotten you guys all squished in this area is because the end of the exhibition here, it really is the beginning in a way that you can trace how Feminist Land Art Retreat was initiated in 2010. They are two artists who work collaboratively, and I don't know where they are in the crowd, but they are Nicole Andre and Vanessa Disler. And they are also practicing artists. They have their own individual practices. And so Feminist Land Art Retreat is their collaboration. And the way to describe it might be how not to describe it. It's not an event. It is not a group or an author or participants. It's more of a conceptual proposition. And the archive that's on the wall here shows a poster from 2010. And it's way at the top. It's a yellow poster when you have a chance to get in there and look. It is really the first artwork that they made. Both of them were at Emily Carr University, and we're quite surprised that many of their peers weren't interested in calling themselves feminists. And so they were looking at the question of what is a feminist, what is feminism today, what is third wave feminism, and also looking at their position within a kind of male-dominated art world and wondering how to make art within that. So Feminist Land Art Retreat, Amy Kazmierczak, who is somewhere in the crowd here, who has been quite integral to this project, Free Reign, from the beginning. I like the way that she phrases it. The text is available in the guide that is at the beginning of the exhibition there. She says, I'm going to also start using FLAR, the shorter version. FLAR's speculative structure allows for a fluid consideration of the desires, anticipations, and judgments that are provoked by reorganizing concepts of feminine nature and solitude. It is a projection of historical, philosophical, and aesthetic ideas composed through forms, images, and text. So with this poster, they advertised an event that never actually happened. And it said Feminist Land Art Retreat in the Ilaho Valley, and they even came up with an email address that you could email for more information. And then they appropriated an image of Robert Smithson's iconic spiral jetty that is an earthwork from the 1960s in the Great Salt Lakes in Utah. And they, so it's a huge work of art that is made of rocks that go out into the lake and is a big spiral. And they split that into two so that it looks like fallopian tubes. And so it was a way of provoking a conversation around feminist land art. Robert Smithson's one of the most iconic land artists from that period. Maybe lesser known was his wife, Nancy Holt, who also was making major works on the land. And land art at that time was a way of leaving the gallery space and doing projects that were often very monumental. And for these well-known male land artists, they required a lot of resources. So a lot of machinery to move rocks and financial resources to get the photograph that we now know of, that we can identify, say, of the spiral jetty. And so it's a little bit of an inside joke in some ways, like what does a feminist land art retreat look like? So a lot of their practice is quite ephemeral. And this wall will show, you'll see kind of the progression of different projects as posters. So tapping into traditions of street art and activist practices. And they have t-shirts, they have nylons that have FLAR all the way up the side that are beautiful, a temporary tattoo that says FLAR, and also a lot of these ephemeral projects were artworks. They existed as the project that they would contribute to an exhibition. So there's a map that you can follow and get more information about each of those, including that takeaway poster that you would have picked up in the beginning of the exhibition. And so with that poster, that kind of gives you an introduction to this project, Free Reign. And it was initiated in 2017 with the videos that you see behind you, and I'll talk about in a moment, and features the image of the horse in confrontation with the camera, which gives you kind of a sense of the themes that they're working with in the exhibition. And is also, so it's foregrounding this sort of destabilizing relationship between the subject of the horse and the object. And on the flip side of that are lyrics that you will hear sung on the ceramic bowl speaker that's on that wall that I'll also speak about more in a moment. And just while we're all standing here, the very far room is a resource area that has a collection of books that are all the resources many of the resources that the artists turn to and have used as part of the research towards their project. And there are 3 binders as well, so artist binders. And this is drawing from a kind of tradition of the collage works of artist Issa Genskin, or artist binders like Arthur Jaffa, who's a filmmaker and visual artist. And so they've kind of used these, and you'll see these themes kind of coming up around connecting to film language and film production. So they call them tone books, which is like how you put together all the images, the research material towards making a film. And so they're, within these books, you'll see sort of the messiness behind coming up with these really slick, beautiful videos. It's all the background, behind the scenes work. You'll see some production shots of directors in Western films, which I'll talk about in a moment, horse and cowboy material, female archetypes like cowgirls, and references to land art, minimalist art, and space and sci-fi. So the more that you look at all of this work, and as we go along, all of these references will become apparent in the work. Oh, hello? So I'm going to get you just to turn around and we'll look at these videos. And as I said, we'll turn on the audio once I've finished the tour, so you'll really get a sense of the full videos.
Is that Leonardo da Vinci's image?
I'll talk about that in a moment, yeah. Okay, this is really awkward for me. I'm sorry you can't see me. I'm going to be the voice from above. So Free Reign, the exhibition title, gives you a sense of feminist land art retreat's interest in deconstructing and using the Western genre, film genre, as core at the heart of their project here. So Free and Reign kind of incites the idea of this tension between freedom, but also using reins, the sense of control. And it's actually a term to connote riding without reins and letting the horse lead, which is very important to their project. Free rein offers alternative images to wildness, freedom, and autonomy to those that have catalyzed colonial settlement and constructed feminine relationships with nature. And it complicates this relationship between human, animal, and land through a critical feminist lens. And so the work that we're looking at here is a 3-channel video that is called No Man's Land, the trilogy. And there are trilogies throughout the exhibition as well that I'll try to point out. And the first video was made in 2017 for the Etude Gallery in Berlin. And the first video is this one over there. And it was shot just outside of Berlin in the German Democratic Republic, or former German Democratic Republic, on a faux dude ranch. And they had access to this ranch through a curator that they were working with at the Etude Gallery, Elodie Evers. And she actually has a practice of working with horses that's a healing practice called Feldenkrais. And so you see a little bit of that featured in this video here. And it's an energetic, somatic way of working with horses. And so you start to get a sense from watching all of these 3 videos of more of a generative exchange. And so really what they're getting at is creating these alternative images to the classical Western, where you would see the male-centered Lone Ranger out in the landscape, and you would see, typically, we would see it from the male perspective of this kind of heroic cowboy out on the range. And for many of you living in Kamloops, the images here really show more like what it's like to live and work with horses and cows. Soon we're going to see an image pop up of goats and goats being birthed. This video here was shot in Heffley Creek, so not far from us. And it's a working ranch where horses are used to herd cattle. And it's a family ranch as well. So again, more of a realistic feeling of working with animals and this more intuitive way of working with them. The third video was shot in Galisteo, New Mexico. And you see here the artist rancher Denise Lynch, who they worked with and featured in the video on her land that she's inherited from her mother, who is also an artist. And in this video, you see Denise forming clay, and the bowl is the bowl that you see on that wall there. And it's natural clay that's been harvested or dug up from the Galisteo basin. And there's these minerals, really beautiful sparkly mica that appears in the clay. And then she is also shown cutting the horse's tail, and she uses horse hair to burnish marks on the bowl.
Sharon, can I just interrupt for a second?
Yes.
I just want to say this is Taylor, and she's one of the horses here. This is her family's ranch.
Amazing.
Well, you live
Welcome.
in, so don't you? Yeah. So she's actually never gone to see it before, and her and Jessica is going to be here a bit later. Who's the other one?
I'm so glad you guys made it. And that's Amy speaking right now. So Amy was really involved from this project from the beginning, and this trilogy, this video, No Man's Land, was shown when Amy was curator at the Audain Gallery at SFU. And Since then, it has traveled to the Robert McLaughlin Gallery as well. So this video and the straw bales, which I'll talk about in a moment, were the kind of the core of those exhibitions. And now, am I cutting out, Emily? You guys hear me? Okay, good. So now with this exhibition, Free Reign, it's been expanded upon. So many new works have been made since then. And I should also mention with the post-production of this, the trilogy was done in Vancouver at the Western Front, where the artists were working in residence. So the idea from the beginning with the trilogy was they were thinking about the horse, the rider, and the land. So that's those are the three kind of protagonists, if you will, rather than the male cowboy, who really figure prominently in all of this work. And they, after shooting that first video in Berlin, they really felt like it was important to expand the video project so that it included multiple perspectives. So now you see the bowl being made here. So I'll just speak about the natural alternative grazers that are hanging from the ceiling. Those of you who live or work on ranches will recognize these. They're just filled, their nets filled with straw, and they're typically used on a farm or a ranch to provide safe food access for the horses. So kind of considered like slow feeders, more akin to how horses would graze naturally on the land. And really meant to provide kind of optimal health for the horses. Ironically, natural alternative grazers also shortens to be nag bags. So there's a derogatory reference perhaps to associations between women and anxiety. Also, you'll see in those binders that I was talking about, the artist binders, that the artists are always looking back to throughout art history. So these become sculptures. They become soft sculptures, and there's always a nod to minimalist practice in their work as well. So before we move into the other corridor there, if you all want to turn around and look at the drawing on the wall. This is called Schema for Free Reign, and obviously they made the drawing directly on the wall while they've been here installing. And this is actually an abstracted drawing of layers of dressage patterns. And the configuration of the videos is also meant to evoke the dressage patterns. Dressage was originally are completely in sync, and the rider will become or appear completely relaxed, and the horse memorizes these movements through the arena. And you can see dressage patterns also in the video being mapped out in the earth by Denise. And so they were thinking about this, again, kind of a nod to other artistic practices like Sol LeWitt's wall drawings. And it becomes more like a cosmic map, or other people have mentioned like Vitruvius's the sort of perfectly proportioned man of Leonardo da Vinci's, perhaps. So there's lots of references. And the cosmic map association it conjures this invisible language of communication between the horse and the rider, and also an interest that the artists have in sci-fi. So not only the Western genre, but sci-fi, and thinking about those associations of the male explorer typically going to space and conquering new territory. And in sci-fi, it's rarely the woman. So you'll also see in their artist books lots of imagery that they've gathered about women in space. So there's a video monitor in the hallway here. It's a new video work called Equal Agents that they've just completed while they were here, actually. And it beautifully gets to the heart of this idea of having the horse as the main protagonist instead of seeing it from far off, from in the distance. You see the horse from directly above, so you get a sense of the horse's subjectivity and her following her own path. And it's like being inside the horse's head almost. And this was shot in Galisteo, New Mexico by Denise, who is riding the horse Sapphire. And so you see her really, just finding her own path, which is just such an unusual viewpoint, unless you ride horses all the time. But to feature the horse in a video in this way is really a perspective that you don't see very often. It's just a 3-minute video, and it includes audio that was commissioned by the artists. The audio is by the Sax Trio. So they're experimental musicians from Berlin. I should say the connection to Berlin is that the artists have lived in Europe a fair amount and went to school there, and Vanessa still lives there. So they wanted some kind of otherworldly sounds, and it kind of sounds spacey, as if you're on another planet in some way. This is also a sound work. It's called Receiver. And again, this is the bowl that was made by Denise Lynch in the video that you see in Galisteo. And so she's really honed the pottery techniques that were cultivated by the indigenous Tano and Keres people of the region. And it's a hand-built bowl. And you can see the shine of the mica within that, and then the marks that were made from the horsehair. And it functions as a speaker. And they commissioned an artist to write and record Susanna Brown, a song called Hearts in the Ring. And so this is the song, the lyrics of which you can read on the back of the takeaway poster. And it's meant to be quite quiet. We were playing around quite a bit with the volume today because it's really meant to be something that you can put your ear up against. And there's no sound right now because it's just a 2-minute loop, but it plays every 5 minutes. So also meant to kind of pervade the gallery with this lonesome ballad. And if you can squeeze down here, we're gonna do a little loop through. So these images in the hallway here are kind of meant to be like film posters that you would be entering the exhibition and be seeing the advertisement for the exhibition that you're about to see. And again, there are 3, so it's a trilogy. The first one you will have seen on the exterior of the building. So they've taken over what we usually use for our marketing banners. And there's this beautiful image, the close-up image of Gina the horse and her eye. And she is controlling the gaze. A lot of the kind of film theory that they're referencing in their work has to do with theorists like Laura Mulvey, who talks a lot about the male gaze. And so Gina the horse is staring right at us, and you can see the reflection of the camera in her eye as well, which is kind of a self-reflexive nod to that relationship again. And then these two are the continuation of that trilogy, showing the figure or the rider and the land. And so part of using advertising as a language is them thinking about the way that we receive information and perhaps how you can manipulate that. So we'll just continue walking through the hallway into the open area here. Just watch the rope on the floor. You guys are waiting. You are invited to walk through this work. Just don't step on the rope. So this is a work called Bridle. You might kind of get a sense of the shape being like a halter with reins for a horse, but at monumental scale. And this work was also in the Audain Gallery exhibition, but they have created it again here, and so it takes different shapes depending on the space that it's installed. And it's reimagined, this halter is reimagined as a suspended sculpture, and it also mimics the reproductive system, so perhaps a uterus or an IUD. There's references to the massive scale here of land art that I was talking about, and also forms of minimalist soft sculpture. Some people have said it reminds them of a corset or a bridal veil, a necklace or a chain. And what they're also interested in here is like the use of the straw and the nets with the natural alternative grazers, the use of the natural materials and thinking about the ways in which humans mediate natural materials all the time. And so here, this is the jute rope that they've covered in this beautiful, rich red clay. And I understand that over time, the oils of the rope will come through and it'll become quite red. And then these are 3 large-scale horse blankets on the wall as well, so another trilogy for you. And their interest, too, with the bridle, or the halter and the reins and the blankets, is this tension between comfort and control. So that is ever present in all of the Free Rein project. And also, they're specifically looking at minimalist practices. Previously, they have shown these blankets, different ones, on the floor and covered them in clay. But they were interested here in referencing Robert Morris's felt works that hang from the wall. And then lastly, we see these works reflected in the mirrors that they've included. And so when you look at the poster wall, you'll see similar text that was created as a double-sided poster for the Audain Gallery exhibition. But here they're using the full-length mirror for the texts that describe horse body language in an aggravated state and a relaxed state, which can also be used to describe human body language. And they've appropriated this and shifted a bit from source material that they gathered from a manual describing how to read horse body language. So again, it ties back into the relationship between us and the animals. And the nice thing too about when you stand over here actually is that you really see the reflection of these works. And the choice of this color of fabric to me evokes the idea of flesh, but whose flesh? Maybe a very white person's flesh. And you can see that in the mirrors too, which makes me think about foundation and makeup and how that is meant to match certain skin colors and the relationship of women and their reflection as well. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for listening and for moving so adaptly through this space. There's Vanessa. And maybe we can give them a big hand for their major effort here.